Well, Shabbat Shalom and welcome. This is Valley Best Shalom Torah study for Shabbos. It's Shabbos just before Rosh Hashanah, so it's Taka, a big Shabbos. And this morning, I am delighted to welcome my very dear friend and a wonderful, wonderful teacher of Torah, Rabbi Adam Greenwald, locally of Irvine, California, or used to be Tustin, now it's Irvine,
It's right on the border,
somewhere south of Disneyland. That's where he hangs out.
behind the orange curtain.
Right. Adam's my teacher, my friend, a wonderful teacher of Torah. And Adam, thank you for coming on coming on the program.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. We were talking just before we started recording that you have been my rabbi and my teacher for as long as I can remember. You were the very first rabbi I ever met when my family signed us up for Ramah summer camp, for family camp, when I was in, I think, the third grade. And you were my teacher on the last day of rabbinical school. So I am so thrilled to be here with you. Thank you
Well,
for
I gladly take responsibility for everything you are. So,
and the blame.
and the blame. So, listen, you and I are taking this hour out from all the work that we put in to prepare for these holidays because these holidays are terribly important to us. This is the gathering of the tribe.
Yeah.
This is the covenanting ceremony. So, our Jews who participate in our congregations, and so many others find their way into the synagogue. They sit in front of us, and they ask us for truth at this really, really fraught moment of our experience. And it's a fraught moment. Listen, it's
Yeah.
difficult for Jews. It's difficult. Um, Israel is in a dire strait, both internally and externally in the world. Gaza, this war in Gaza continues, and there's so many questions that are raised of it. Anti-Semitism all about us and all over the world. And then we turn to America at large, and there's so many questions about the future of this democracy. So, of all of that stuff, Adam, what do Jews need to hear this Yontif?
Oh God, I hope that I can guess. That is what is keeping every rabbi I know up at night, trying to figure out what it is that we can say. First of all, that feels true to us. Second of all, that people can receive. You said people are coming looking for truth on Rosh Hashanah. I think that Jack Nicholson had it right, or Aaron Sorkin when he wrote it, right? The truth, you can't handle the truth. It's hard to be confronted with the truth. And who even knows exactly what truth is and looks like these days? So I don't have a perfect answer to that. I know what I'm talking about on Rosh Hashanah. Maybe you'll help me figure out Yom Kippur, which feels like I've got lots of time. Um, what I'm talking about on Rosh Hashanah in my community is, and again, something I owe to you. Most of the Torah I have is just crib notes on Eddie Feinstein. I taught a Heschel class this year, from January until Rosh Chodesh Elul, once a week. Put it on Zoom, and I thought about a dozen people would come and we'd read some Heschel essays together, and it just felt like it was Torah for a world on fire. Here's this guy who escapes Europe 6 weeks before the Nazis roll into Poland, comes to Cincinnati to be a total stranger in a strange land, living in a student dormitory where he can't even eat the food because they don't keep a kosher kitchen at HUC at that time. And instead of choosing to live a quiet life with his wife and his daughter and teach his classes, maybe write a few books of scholarship that nobody will read. He instead chooses to go out and be a prophet. And I wanted that kind of Torah. I felt like I needed that kind of Torah, and I thought a dozen people would come and join. And I had more than 100 who cycled through this weekly class over
Wow.
8 months.
Wow.
And we read these essays together and speeches, and it was profoundly encouraging in the sense of like giving courage, to be reminded that there are fires now and there have always been fires, and that what Jews do when the fire is raging is to try our best to put it out. And so I'm going to be talking on Rosh Hashanah about just what you said before, the many ways in which the world feels on fire, and the invitation and obligation to be firefighters.
It's wonderful, a wonderful theme. And Heschel exactly is the exact personality to bring it. He once began a speech with the words, "You know what it's like to wake up in the morning and discover that your country has gone insane."
Hmm,
It was a speech about the Vietnam War, which was
hmm,
a conflict that tore the country apart. Let me ask you to back up for just a second. I want to tap your thought because I think that I think it's actually very important for the Jewish community to hear our thoughts for just a moment before we come to shul.
hmm.
And that is what goes through the mind of a rabbi who cares deeply about the community he leads or she leads, deeply about the world, has their own opinions of politics and morality and culture. What exactly goes through your mind to prepare yourself and to prepare these words for this community? I'll give you just one tiny insight. I led a sermon seminar. We rabbis gather in collectives to sort of trade ideas and trade resources before the holiday. And they asked me to come to to Northern California to sit with rabbis, not like 50 colleagues, 50 rabbis, in a beautiful synagogue in Marin. And I said to the leaders of this, the chairperson, "What do you want me to talk about?" And he said, "It's real simple. Um, talk about how we give our truth without losing our jobs."
Mhm, mhm.
So tell me something about your process and about the inner thought, the inner meditation, the inner work that you do, first of all, to get yourself ready for the holiday, and second of all, to choose topics, to choose words that you want to share with your community.
I'm happy to reflect on that together. I wonder if before I do, you are my teacher, and I'm thinking about your teacher. I'm thinking about the way that Rabbi Schulweis would approach this, and I'm wondering if you have insight from how
Well,
he approached
he
the.
was, I got to tell you,
Yeah, yeah.
Beinenu, and you know how much I love him. He was infuriating because he would start 6 months in advance. I mean, I remember one year he literally showed up on the first day of Pesach and said, "I have a draft of my Rosh Hashanah talk. Would you like to see it?" And I said, "Damn you." Like, how do you do that?
Right, right.
Because he conceived of that role of, first of all, he lived in a world, he grew up in a world in where oratory mattered,
Mhm,
right? And we don't. We have a world which is flooded with words. This is, but in his world, people came to hear a great speaker. They
yeah.
came to hear a great rabbi. They came to hear not only the content of his talk, but the rhetoric of his talk.
Mhm,
It was really part of the world that he was raised in. He once told me this amazing story of listening to Stephen S. Wise, who was probably the greatest rabbi of the 20th century. When he was a little kid, his father took him to a rally in Madison Square Garden to hear Stephen Wise talk, and how moved he was by the power of the oratory.
yeah.
So that was one thing that motivated Harold. The second thing, of course, was he really saw himself. He really believed in ideas.
Mhm,
He really believed that a community is shaped by ideas, that human beings are shaped by ideas. He took ideas really seriously. And so his role in the world was to share ideas and
mhm,
to share ideas in a fashion where people could accept them. Remember, he grows up in a world in where religion is denigrated. The great scholars were Jewish by birth, but all atheists by practice. And
mhm,
he saw
mhm,
one of his tasks in the world was to demonstrate the intellectual competence of Judaism, of Torah. So he
mhm,
purposely spoke over the heads of his community,
mhm.
right? The joke was that when you joined our synagogue, you got a philosophical dictionary as a bonus because he
Uh,
would use words that no, people had to go home and look up these words. And he
mhm,
did that on purpose because he wanted people to understand these ideas are powerful and they matter. And you
mhm,
need to rise up to his level. You
mhm,
need to rise up to the level of thinking along with him. That was the second thing that was important. And of course, the third thing that was important is his courage.
mhm,
He saw the world, as you said, beautifully as a prophet, and he believed it was his task to tell the truth. And if people got angry at him, they got angry. I remember one of the greatest sermons certainly landmark sermon. In 1992, he gave a sermon where he welcomed LGBT people to the shul,
Mhm.
gay people to the shul. Um, it was something in 1976, he had given a sermon where he said, in 1976 context, he said, okay, homosexuality is not a disease, or it's not a moral malady, it's a disease.
Mhm.
And that was liberal for
Sure.
1976.
Sure.
But what had happened over the years was he began to meet families who have gay children. He began to meet gay people, and he
Mhm.
realized that that's all wrong, just
Mhm.
wrong.
Mhm.
And he comes to the board of directors at their summer retreat and he says, this is what I'm going to talk about. And half the board of directors said, oh, don't do it. It's just going to make things bad.
Mhm.
And he
Mhm.
said, I have to.
Mhm.
And he gave this beautiful sermon about where, where he said, and the end of the sermon was so beautiful because he said, I know you're here
Mhm.
and I know you're hiding. So
Mhm.
listen carefully.
Mhm.
This is your shul. I am your rabbi. We are your family. You belong here.
Mhm.
It was the only time in his 50-year career at this synagogue that he got a standing ovation.
Mhm.
People
Mhm.
stood up and screamed because
Mhm.
suddenly so many families come forward, so many kids, so many young people came forward and said, that's me. Thank you. You have no idea what a weight you've lifted off my heart.
Yeah.
Um, Remarkable. So these are the oratory, ideas, and courage are
Yeah.
the things that marked his or his process.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so
That was a long answer
powerful.
to a
It's
very
so powerful to
good
hear.
question. Yeah.
It's so powerful to hear. And I have a photo up in my office of him and two other rabbis I revere, Eli Spitz, who was my predecessor here at CBI, and Sharon Brous, who was my rabbi at Ikar and my boss in my first job. Um, we took a picture all together at the last of those sermon seminars that
Yeah.
Rabbi Schulweiss attended.
Yeah.
And he is such a beacon of courage. Um, but I do think that what you describe about different eras and what people are looking for in different eras is real, right? The era that Rabbi Schulweis occupied, the era of the rabbinate that you started, and the era of the rabbinate that I'm entering into a generation later, does process information and receive information so very differently.
Right.
Right? Everything now is in the form of social media hot take. And one of the things that I talked about in my congregation last Shabbos is the way in which the social media ecosystem so powerfully discourages people from taking a breath before reacting
Mm,
because when something significant or that's perceived to be significant happens in the world, there is an expectation that people who have something to say and have something to say like that. And if you don't have something to say within the first, I don't even want to say 24 hours, within the first 2 hours, there's a perception that you're not saying something. And why did you not say something? And that encourages really sloppy thinking because who's got a brilliant take in the immediate aftermath of some kind of earth-shaking event? And it feels like there are earth-shaking events 12 times a day, every day, in a absolutely exhausting sort of fire hose reality that we're living in. And so this pressure to be constantly producing a take that may not be thoughtfully considered, but at least is something, is really one of the great communication challenges of our time. And, when you describe Rabbi Schulweis starting thinking about what he's going to talk about 6 months in advance, I think like how we have come from 6 months in advance developing an idea to the headline dropped, what's going to be your Instagram post about it in the next half an hour, done on your phone while sitting on the John.
mm.
Um, I try to think about High Holy Day sermons, and of course, you are my teacher. You were my literal teacher in rabbinical school in the class called homiletics on giving sermons, and you have been my teacher in so many other ways in reading and listening to you over the years. I, I'm trying to cut a middle ground. I don't have the capacity, the discipline, and I don't think we live in a world where I could think about what the message is 6 months in advance. But I would really like a High Holy Day sermon to say something that sounds a bit like I've sat with it, that
Mm,
sounds a bit like I've cracked a book, that sounds a bit like I've had a meaningful conversation with a teacher or two or a wise congregant or two, that I'm coming to folks not with a half-baked idea, but with an actual argument to make about how we might be living better and how we might hold on to hope and stave off despair. So week to week in my show, I don't write sermons. I speak extemporaneously. I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to talk about, but I stand up and I talk. And on High Holy Days, I script everything out because I have everybody in one place and I've got one shot for them to listen. And I want to say something that matters. And I also want to demonstrate to them that I have spent time in real thought about what matters. And
mm,
I may or may not hit, a pastor friend said that giving sermons is like feeding fish, right? You throw the flakes and you don't know which flake goes to which fish. I stand up there and certainly don't know which flake is going to which fish, and what's going to land. And there is no chance everything is going to land equally to everybody. Um, but I at very least want them to walk away and say, um, my rabbi spent some real time thinking about what he wanted to say to us, and he treated us with that respect. And he
yeah.
treated these times with that respect, the respect that they actually are worthy of us spending real time in real consideration rather than just response, response, response.
Mm, that's lovely.
How
Thank
does
you.
that resonate with you?
Yeah, look, so we all know there's a nightmare that we rabbis have, and I think it's okay to confess this now. There's a very famous story about a brilliant, brilliant young man living in Germany in the 20s, um, who had brilliant student of philosophy, and he had made the decision, especially under the pressure of his professors and his family, to convert to Christianity
Hmm.
because they told him he'd never go anywhere in German academics as a Jew. And half of his cousins had already converted to Lutheranism, and they were waiting to welcome him, and he'd get a professorship in the university and have his life made. And so he starts the process, and then he makes an interesting discovery. He makes an interesting decision because he's very strongly has strong convictions. He says, "I'm going to become a Christian like the ancient Christians did. I'm going to become a Christian like a Jew."
Hmm.
And so he said, "I'm going to go to Yom Kippur services, and the very next morning I'm going to go and take my baptism."
Right.
Right. So the story is he tells his mother this, and she throws him out of the house. She won't, and he goes to a synagogue. We actually know which synagogue he went to, and he sat in the back, and something happened to him. He heard something. He felt something.
Yeah.
Something touched him. And the next morning, he didn't go to the baptism and he wrote his cousins and said, "I don't need that anymore." And he became the great philosopher Franz Rosenzweig,
Yeah.
who unfortunately died of ALS at a very young age, but would have and may have been one of the greatest Jewish philosophers of modernity.
Yeah.
So you and I go to Shul Yontif and we look at the back row and we know he's sitting there.
Yeah.
And he wears a different face every year and
Hmm.
he wears different clothes every year. But you can see the kid who the parents dragged to Shul.
Hmm.
The thing is, come with me for a half an hour and then you can go be with your friends. Or the kid who wandered in from a college campus. There's a college campus near you and just, heard that they're allowed to come to Shul for free. Or the kid who, or all of those kids.
Yeah.
And you and I ask ourselves, or we make a prayer. I think I actually make a prayer.
Yeah.
Please, God, give me whatever it takes to reach the heart of that kid,
Yeah.
whether it's the music, whether it's the prayer, whether it's the community that sits with that child, whether it's the words I speak, whatever it is, give it to me just this once. Let
Hmm.
me reach that kid. And
Hmm.
sometimes you say, please, God, keep me from pushing him away.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's what goes through my mind. I mean, I
Hmm.
literally start every service on these holidays with that meditation.
Yeah.
I know he's there, or she's there, or they are there. Give me the strength to reach them. Whatever it is, just give me the strength to reach them.
Hmm.
So that's what I do. And what I do is much like you. I tried to find what I can't talk about Inyana de Yoma, what they call the matters of the day. I'm not Rachel Maddow. I'm not Tucker Carlson. Thank God, not Tucker Carlson. I'm not Rachel Maddow. I'm not Tom Friedman. I'm not David Brooks. I'm not Brett Stevens. You don't want to, I'm not even Yossi Klein Alevi. You don't want to listen to me for commentary on the event of the day. That's not why they're coming to us.
Hmm.
They want a bigger context.
Hmm.
They want a broader view. Tell me from the context of the Jewish experience over the centuries where I am now,
Yeah.
what I'm going through now, and give me some of the resources that the centuries of Jewish experience has found to cope with what I'm going through now.
Yeah. And inoculate me with hope.
Yeah, hope. That's
Th-
what this year is about. So
That is,
all of you who are listening for a second, let me tell you
yeah,
something. If your rabbi don't give you hope,
right.
come to Rabbi Greenwald's shul. I
Uh,
will.
eh,
Because this is exactly what we need today.
yeah. Yeah. There's a line that's been living with me a lot since last year. It's not a line from our Masorah, from our tradition, but it feels really Jewish, and it comes from the essayist Bell Hooks, who said, "We can only build the world we can imagine."
Mm,
And I think to myself about the way in which this world right now feels like it narrows the window of what we can imagine. Can we imagine a better way of being? Can we imagine a different path forward? That we get cynical and our vision narrows. And it's not that new age crap where if you can believe it, you can be it, because that's not true, right? Lots of people believe and want desperately something and they don't get it. But it is true that if you can't believe it's possible, then you damn yourself to not getting it,
yeah.
right? It's not true in the positive, but it is true in the negative. It is true that if you have given up on the possibility of something different, then you have guaranteed that for yourself, and not only that for yourself, but that for the future generations. And
Mm.
so I feel like the message that I have been hitting over and over and over again, and it is, and I'm sure you told me this at one point, rabbis give the sermons that they need to hear, and we are given the privilege of giving ourselves some therapy in public and hoping that it helps people along as well. Um, I just keep coming back to this idea that Judaism is a rejection of despair. And Heschel says in an essay in The Insecurity of Freedom, says Judaism's long war is a war with fatalism. That what it means to believe that God freely chose to create us and then created us in God's image as free choosers is that we are not damned to keep repeating patterns. That there can be an eruption of newness at any point, so long as we're willing to embrace it and choose it. And so I don't know if my congregants have gotten sick of hearing some version of this sermon being given over and over and over again.
They need it. They absolutely need it.
I think we do. I
We
think
all need
we
it.
need it. I need it.
Right.
Because the temptation to just crawl into bed and pull the covers up over one's head is really strong.
Yeah, except there's another antidote to that, which you exactly know, because I can see the picture of her right behind your head. So you have a beautiful, beautiful young kid who lives with you, your beautiful daughter, right? This year, my grandson is now in school here in the synagogue, so I
Mm,
get to see him every day. And there's something about looking into the eyes of a tiny child who still sees the world with wonder,
yeah,
for whom everything is new, and then feeling deep down inside my deep responsibility to that child, to give that child the world that I want him or her to have.
yeah,
That I think motivates you to go back and give the sermon again.
yeah, yeah,
That gives you the sermon again. Because again, that fatalism, it's worse. It's a deep, dark cynicism that says nothing can ever change. What is must be inevitable.
yeah,
And nothing can ever change. And it's so rampant. That fatalism is so rampant in this culture.
yeah.
And it's so easy. Look, again, you turn on the evening news, I listen for 10 minutes and turn it off.
Right,
I don't want to hear it anymore. It's too hard to hear.
right, right, right.
It's too hard to hear. So I want to come to shul I want a larger context in which I can fit the experience of my life. So let me ask you a slightly different question because we've talked about Adam and Ed as rabbis. Now let's talk about Adam and Ed as Jews.
Mm.
Um, Shabbos, we have most of the weekend, and then Monday night, of course, begins the holiday, and then we get 10 days. So, Rabbi, tell me what I need to do, not about the biggest problems of the world, but about me. How do
Mm.
I prepare myself to stand before the throne in
Yeah.
judgment and offer something, a resolution, a vision of my own life? How do I prepare myself for Yontif?
Yeah. Um, Erev Rosh Hashanah sermons are always for me a little bit of a throwaway because, it's like, let's get through a quick service so we can get to the brisket.
Don't make fun of the brisket. So,
No, I'm not. I'm headed
do
there,
you
but
know how much kosher brisket costs this year?
I do indeed. Now that I help manage a synagogue budget, I do indeed, and oy vavoy. Um, so I tend to speak, pretty short, but sometimes it winds up becoming the framing for the holidays in general. And last year, I decided like 10 minutes before Erev Rosh Hashanah what exactly it was that I wanted to say. And what I said was, um, just because we are in pain about the state of the world, and particularly, last year coming into the first anniversary of October 7th, just the rawness of that feeling. Um, just because we're in pain about out there doesn't get us off the hook from in here.
Hmm.
Just what I hear you say, saying, reframing the question. Okay, we can try Gewalt about the world, and there's plenty to try Gewalt for the whole of this conversation. But that doesn't get us off the hook with making things right with your mother or your brother or your friend. Um, and so it's that balancing act between not losing sight of the big vision and not allowing ourselves to be distracted by what's going on and all the noise out there to neglect to actually live the life that we have control over.
Hmm.
And the image for me for Teshuvah is that sign that's in the British subway system in the tube that says "Mind the Gap." They put it on hipster T-shirts, right? The idea that there is an inevitable gap between the man that I know myself to be at my best and the man that I am, and the husband that I promised to be to Anne under the chuppah, and the husband that I am, and the father to that gorgeous little girl that I want to be at my highest, and I'm often too distracted, lazy, or frustrated to be. There's always a gap. And for me, this whole season is about honestly identifying the gap and trying to close the gap before it becomes a gulf.
Hmm.
Right? Trying to
Nice input.
narrow the distance between what is and what ought to be before the tectonic plates shift so far away that gap is unbridgeable.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's what I'm orienting myself towards right now. Um, and it's hard to do it all. It's hard to do it all. How are we supposed to fix the world on fire and also, figure out how I can stop getting frustrated with my kid when she won't put on her shoes? That's
So there's a wonderful teaching. You know this teaching well, I'm sure. The Rambam, Maimonides in Hilchos Teshuvah, in his Code of Jewish Law, has a section on Teshuvah, which is the way of change, the way of repentance. And in the middle of there, he has this little vignette where he says, imagine all of your merits, all of your mitzvahs on one side of a scale, and all of your averas, all of your shortcomings, your flaws and sins on the other scale, and it balances. And your next act is going to determine your destiny, the character that you have. And and he says, imagine the whole world is that way, and your next act is going to determine the destiny of the universe. And he says that's the attitude you have to bring to shul.
Mhm.
Because if you come to shul with the attitude, and most Americans do, I think, meaning I'm basically a really good person, you're
Mhm.
going to ignore all the shortcomings.
Hmm.
You're going to say, well, that's not me. You'll rationalize them.
Hmm.
But if you come to shul saying, well, I'm a rotten, terrible, disgusting human being, then you're never going to make the effort to
Right.
change. Change only happens when it's between. But then you and I have a dear friend, Rabbi Mark Borowitz, who actually is going to be our guest on this program next week.
Oh,
And
wow.
Mark has chutzpah, enough chutzpah to gloss the Rambam, enough chutzpah to correct Maimonides, the greatest rabbi who ever lived.
Uh-huh.
And Mark, having worked at Beit Shuvah for he founded it with Harriet and worked there for all these years, has a slightly different take. And he says it's not 50-50, it's 49-51. You are 49% good and 51% rotten.
Mm.
And all I want from you is 2%.
Hmm.
It's the 2% solution. Can you find 2% more time to spend with the ones you love?
Mm.
Can you find 2% more resources to give to the community and make the world what it ought to be? Can you
Mm.
find 2% more energy and opportunity to make yourself a more holy person? Can you find
Yeah.
2% more? Because if I ask you for 180 degrees, you'll never do it.
Right. Right.
But if I ask you for 2%, you say, well, sure, I can do that. So I don't need you to be, I don't need to be 100. You don't have to become a saint when your kid won't put her shoes on.
Right.
You just
Right.
have to be 2% more kind,
Uh-huh.
and I think that's a brilliant way of thinking
It
about the
really is.
process.
It really is. Um,
Apropos of your previous
yeah.
comment about
Yeah.
instant responses, so I use in my rabbin, I use letter writing as a counseling tool. So when folks have a new baby, I ask them to write the kid a letter.
Hmm.
Here's the names we chose for you, and here's what we hope. And when they have a bar mitzvah, they write the kid a letter. Here's what I hope you are as a grown up.
Yeah.
And when folks lose a loved one, I have them write a letter. Here's what you taught me. And when people get married, so I think Rosh Hashanah, I've asked people write a letter.
Hmm.
Write a letter to your descendants, whether they're children, grandchildren, or beyond, and
Hmm.
tell them what your life ought to teach them, what you want them to learn from your life. Put that stuff down. And I find that people have done it
Hmm.
and they've come back and said, first of all, I didn't realize how wise I am. I'm a lot smarter than I am.
Hmm.
And it forces them to sit and think. Like, why should we be the only ones struggling to think and write? Let
Yeah.
them do it too.
Yeah.
And they really sit and think about what this year has brought them and what wisdom they would want to give their children, grandchildren, and beyond about life. And I think that kind of thinking is really what the holiday encourages us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have an exercise that I do with myself that's along the same lines. I said you were my teacher on the last day of rabbinical school. The last assignment, though, I got in rabbinical school came from Reb Mimi Feigelson, who was a
Beautiful.
unique and remarkable teacher in the
Soul. Yeah.
world,
Great
an
soul.
incredible soul, an incredible soul. And she told us, you will spend the rest of your career working for boards of directors, not of your choosing. God bless. Um,
May God bless and keep them.
yeah. Um, and before you go to work for those boards, hire your own board. Hire your own, in your mind, set of people to whom you feel most accountable.
Hmm,
And she said, go back and revisit that list on a regular basis.
lovely.
And so in Elul, I go back to my board list and I fire a couple of people whose voices have not been serving or who I found, you know, I I have drifted from, and I hire more people and think, this is somebody who I would want to have be proud of me.
Hmm,
And I want to live in such a way and act in such a way that I would make this person smile. And I don't generally tell people that they're on my board. And some of them are people who I've never met. Some of them are some of the teachers that we have already referenced and talked about together. And, some of them are people who I met once on a trip and they stay with me. So
hmm.
I did this AJWS, American Jewish World Service, alternative spring break trip when I was in college. And we went to Honduras to all go do construction on a school building. What they needed with a bunch of Jewish college kids doing construction. These Hondurans are looking at us as we are terribly like putting together a building which will fall down, which they'll have to put back up after we're done. But we felt very proud of ourselves. And toward the very end of that trip, the village priest in this little town invited us all out to the local bar to sit with him. And he said, over some really weak Honduran beers on a dirt floor bar, he said, I really wish that groups like yours wouldn't come here. We just spent, the whole week feeling really good about ourselves. He said, I really wish that groups like yours wouldn't come here, because if you come here thinking that you can save us, you can't, and that's not the message that my people need.
Mm,
If you want to come here as partners, not as saviors.
mm,
And that informed the way that I think about everything, everything, and not just in the social justice kind of realm, but that informs how I think about myself pastorally. When somebody sits down, on the couch in my office, to think about, I'm not here to try to save anybody, or do the work for anybody. I'm here to be a walking partner. And Father Tito, in this little village in Honduras, I spent 1 hour with, and he's been on my board for 25 years.
oh, what's beautiful.
So I always think about, who to whom do I feel accountable? Before we do all of this liturgy about standing before Melech Malchei HaMelachim, which is all a little bit abstract to me about what it means to stand in front of a throne of judgment, I can think about, am I living in a way that makes my teachers proud? Am I living
Mm,
in a way that would make my kid proud? Am I living in a way that lives up to who I wanted to be when I was 14, or who I was afraid that I might become? Um, that's that's kind of my little preparation.
that's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's finish with this. According to the tradition, the world was created on the 25th of Elul,
Hmm.
which I think is yesterday. And this is the week of creation. Rosh Hashanah is the sixth day. It's the day of this. It's the day that human beings were created. So this is the week of creation. Hayom Harat Olam, we will say on Rosh Hashanah. So I want to give you that power for a moment, Rabbi, and I want you to be able to change one thing in the Jewish world. This Yontif, the entire Jewish people will walk out of shul different. How should they be different?
Mm.
So I'm giving you the power of the Creator. How should the Jewish people be different this year?
I would like to see us collectively moving toward the world of our dreams rather than the world of our fears.
Mm,
I would like to see us collectively in a world where we have so much legitimate to be afraid of. And it's not all in our heads. There is legitimate things to be afraid of on all different levels and in all different ways. I'd like to see us stiffen our spines
mm,
and say, I'm going to feel fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. I'm going to feel fear, and I'm still going to pursue boldly a vision of better. And what that vision of better looks like is going to look differently. I don't think anybody should be so arrogant to think that they have the vision of better. And anybody who frankly does think they have the singular vision is somebody who's dangerous and we should stay away from.
mm.
But to say, I'm I'm gonna interrogate myself to ensure that I am operating from a place of what I hope rather than what I fear, what I want to build rather than what I want to keep out. Um, I think that's the way to better.
That's beautiful. Yeah, of course, Maimonides talks about two modes. There's Yira and Ava, right? There's we can work out of the mode of fear, we can work out of the mode of love,
Yeah,
right? And you say Avinu Malkenu on the holiday, right? The king is someone you fear, and presumably your parent is someone that you love.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
beautiful.
I had this teacher in Jerusalem, Rabbi Shalom Brat, who founded Yeshivat Simchat Shlomo, the Carlbach Yeshiva.
Mm,
And um, when we were there for our year in rabbinical school, some of my classmates and I organized to go and do a weekly shiur with him in his
Mm,
home.
wow.
And it was his first time teaching non-Orthodox rabbinical students, but he opened up his home and we sat and we studied together. And he offered a drash on Avinu Malkeinu, where he said, Avinu Malkeinu, aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Our Father, our King, deal with us with mercy, even though we don't have any deeds. Be merciful to us and giving to us, and that'll save us. And he said, aseh imanu could be deal with us, or it could be making us.
Mm,
Avinu Malkeinu, make us vessels of tzedakah v'chesed. Make us full of justice and loving kindness, and by that we will be saved. That it's not so much a prayer that God would do it for us, but that God would fill us up with the motivation to do it for each other.
that's beautiful. That's a lovely drasha.
And so, High Holy Days ought to be a place where people come to fill their tanks.
Mm,
Fill their tank with hope, fill their tank with chesed, fill their tank with tzedakah, and leave refreshed to come out into the world to do the work. If we leave people feeling more hopeful than when they walked in, more inspired than when they walked in, more connected than when they walked in, I think we're doing our jobs. And as you say, it's a tall order because there may be somebody who's coming in to give it that one shot to see if it's worthy.
mm.
And that's a scary thought. But the idea that maybe we have the opportunity to meet a person at the crossroads and take their hand is, I mean, it's just the most privileged way to live a life. So
That's beautiful. Thank you. Rabbi Adam Greenwald of Irvine, California, and the world, thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your Torah. Thank you for your wisdom. And Shabbat Shalom. Have a sweet, blessed Shabbos and Shana Tova, a sweet and wonderful new year. Take care,
thank
Adam.
you for having me.
Bye bye.
Shabbat shalom.